Good morning, here we go. The beginning of episode 9 from my basement, hot basement in Portugal. I hope you like the videos up till now. I've just done 8A and pushed that out, which was just an appraisal of all the bits and bobs, the making of the frames, tools and so on. And I'm going to move on shortly to the motor stringers and try to get the frames and just go about that final process of measuring them. For the time being, well, for this video, I'm going to start another little experiment, which is looking quite far ahead, but very necessary, I think, because what I want to do is to do some more decking and do the stripes and put it out in the sun, because out there in the burning sun it will be a real good test again of the epoxy and the varnish, and to see how it works. This is what I'm doing, or this is what I've started to do. I just cut out a piece of spare 18mm plywood, and I've also cut in the bench saw, no, what do you call it, the table saw. I set up the fence at 60mm because my deck strips, I think, should be, that looks about right. And then I cut up some pieces of the same 3mm mahogany, and I just stapled them together so that I can put it together in there, and I can get myself a tight 6mm gap, and then I'm going to glue it. That's the plan. I've got these clips to hold it, and then to hold it down I'm going to use my staple gun with some, I think it's 11mm staples, as I've tried that before on the nose section, and that worked quite well. You do get a tiny hole, but of course the epoxy fills that up and it became invisible. So that's the plan, and then what I'm going to try and do is some various experiments with the white filler. And there's two ways to go. I can see at the moment that people seem to use an acrylic or something, an adhesive filler. To that end, I've got this stuff, which I found, well, I read it on the website. It's marine adhesive sealant, 3M 5200. And I'm just going to squidge that down in that gap. But first of all, I don't want to put this, I've got the problem, this is 3mm, this mahogany, and that top mahogany layer on both sides is 1mm, so you've got to sand bugger all of that, and you're going to go straight through, and on the deck that's going to notice. And once you've got this glued down, I don't think it's going to be coming up, so I've got to be really careful with the sanding. So I want to near to a finish when I've actually glued and put this stuff down. So if I just go putting this 3M sealant in there, it's going to squidge over, isn't it, onto there, and I'm going to have to clean it off, sand it, and I think, bang, that's going to be hopeless. So what I thought is I'd divide this up into two experiments, and once I finish gluing this, I'll epoxy half of it, and I'll epoxy down into the channel as well with a very small layer, so that once I put this adhesive sealant in there, I'm hoping it will have a grab on the epoxy, and that's possibly where it might go wrong. But then I can just with a knife just scrape it off the surface. It will be on the epoxy, but the epoxy I can sand. If I make it a good thick coat on the top, maybe a couple of coats, I can sand, and I can get this adhesive sealant flat, so that then all I've got to do is to epoxy the whole deck, as it were, and that would then be my finish, save for a couple of coats of epiphanes on the top to give it the UV protection. Then what I'm going to do on the other half, I think, is to not put epoxy down there in that channel, but to just epoxy the top of this, then put my 3N sealant down there, because then it might give it more wood, the bare wood on which to key, which may it may keep it. It may make no difference, but while I'm doing it, I might as well. And then I'll use this whole thing for my 3M marine sealant experiment. And then once I've epoxied, I'm going to stick it upstairs. I'm going to take the other ones away there now, because they're all pretty knackered and opaque, and they've served their purpose. That we know that it's got to be the UV compatible epoxy hardener, the 107, I think it is. And the epiphanes is definitely the better of the varnishes that I've found. But happy to listen to any other. I see there's 2-pack. I've not actually experimented with 2-pack varnish, and that may be worth a go, because 2-pack is normally more durable. Anybody knows anything about 2-pack, I'd love to hear recommendations. So then I can get this up in the sun, and it's hot up there. If it can withstand that for a year, then blimey, it's going to be good. Then I've got these 2 more pieces of wood here, which I'm going to do yet more experiments on a different way of filling that white strip in there. And the second one, I'm going to try to get a white wood, something like birch. What I don't know at the moment, I'm going to try on my cutter, table saw, is to cut a 6mm wide, which is 3mm deep. And I think that's just going to be too aggressive for that. But it would at least get me a parallel piece of wood, which I could then stick down. And if it's just a little bit proud, if I epoxy the wood, I've got a bit of leeway to sand that bit of wood down flat and then epoxy it, and just see if that will, if it will last in the sun. It may be that the wood is better than the 3M sealant. I don't know. The 3M sealant sounds a shitload easier way of doing it to me. So I'm pondering. I've got to find the wood first of all, a white wood. But in reality, any wood will do if I can get it to cut in there. But no, it won't do, will it? Because I really need the white wood to see if it fades. What I'm trying to avoid is to fade to yellow over a period of time, because once this is encapsulated, it's going to be really difficult to sand back. In fact, impossible to sand, because you can't sand this plywood because it's too thin. Which lends another thought, you know, should I be getting 3mm solid plywood sheets, if there is such a thing? I don't know. This is a thinking out loud business, isn't it? Which is not my intention, really. And I've got the third board there and a third method, and I haven't thought of the third method yet, so I've got to go away and put my thinking cap on. But this is going to take up my day today, just to do this piece and get that, and obviously tomorrow to re-epoxy it, and then to put 2 coats of epiphanes and stuff. So I just thought I'd start off episode 9 with this. I'll get these moving, and I'll do another video in a day or 2 when I've got it completed. And it's hopefully this is going to be a really good example of what the deck will look like. And with this mahogany, I think it's going to look good. Interestingly, I saw one of the problems that, well, not a problem, but a forthcoming problem that I can now, with the benefit of doing that, is to match the grain, of course, isn't it? I've tried to match it here, but I did it from 2 sides of the plywood, so I've got different grades, and so these 2 pieces match, obviously with the 6mm gap, but the grain, that's what you want, isn't it, on the deck? I'd never thought of that. If I turn that over, you can either turn it over, turn it upside down. It's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle to find, but I think I've got 3 pieces there, and then these 2, and out of these I can't find any pattern, but I'll have a look. In fact, that looks as though that could be getting somewhere to a pattern, those 2 pieces. Just a thought, that when you're cutting on the table saw, of course you want to keep the strips together, and when you're cutting them on the deck, you want to make sure that you get the patterns aligned, and then it just looks like a sheet of plywood, just happens to have 6mm gaps in it. Thinking ahead, boys, that is good. Nothing on the plans about this, read the books. So I've made my piece of test decking. Here it is. I've glued those pieces on. I spent a bit more time, and I managed to get 3 matching patterns and then 3 in a random one, because I only actually cut 3 strips on the bench saw, so that's all I'm likely to get. And I've glued them down. What I've done is to sand these 4 and not these, because these I spilt the... It's very difficult when you're gluing to stop the epoxy spilling over onto it. You always get marks and stuff, so I've just left them, and then wondered if we then paint the epoxy over the top, does it actually, can you tell? Whereas these 4, I've cleaned them off with a sander, and so it was just clean wood, and then we can see the difference between the 2. And just here you can just see there, I've deliberately sanded down through the first layer of ply on the edge, because you could hold the sander, this thing, on the edge for a bit, and you actually, I was quite surprised. You have to really abuse that piece of wood to go through even that 1mm of plywood. So maybe my fears about sanding this is not founded. You could certainly sand it enough, or I did here, to clean the wood off of any stray epoxy. Whether that makes any difference or not, at the moment it doesn't look like it. So I'm going to leave that to dry for tonight. Tomorrow I'm going to come back and put my marine adhesive sealer in and squidge it. Now that I've got the epoxy on the plywood, on the decking, then I've got much more leeway now to sand that, to get these strips back to level with the deck, and then I can epoxy the whole thing, and I'll do it with the 107 hardener, which is the UV resistant one, and then I can put this, I'll put it outside in the sunshine and see how we go. So, quick update. I've done my piece of simulated decking. There it is, it's glued onto my 18mm ply, 6mm gaps, and I've epoxied this once to get down there through the gaps, and then the second time just on the pieces of wood. And I've been using wet and dry sandpaper with some water to sand it down. Really effective, but I don't know if you can see, it does show up the orange peel marks there, so I need to sand that down a little bit more. I'm going to put this out in the sun for 10 minutes to dry. Then I'm going to put this marine adhesive sealant in there, and the reason that I have sanded that so smooth around there is that I can use a flat scraper and scrape it flat with this surface, so that won't lead, hopefully, to too much sanding. And once we're back down to the epoxy, then that should be good then to epoxy over, and that will just leave me a clean white line. That's the plan. Whether it works or not, I don't know. But the reason, I mean, I put 2 coats on there is you've got to sand through the epoxy to get to the hardwood, because the danger is that, isn't it? And you can see the changing grain there, where I've deliberately sanded through the top layer to see. Not as bad as I thought, actually, because it does look like there is 3 layers of mahogany. I thought it would be just normal plywood, but it's not. So that isn't a desperate situation, but nevertheless I want to stop that situation, and I've got 2 layers of epoxy, which is really hard to sand, so I've got a little bit of leeway before I get down to the wood. So everything looks to me as though this will work. The question is does it stay white out there in the sun all year long with 2 coats, another couple of coats of epoxy, well, maybe 1, and then a couple of coats of epiphanes to finish it off. It'll give it a beautiful finish, but will it last? That's the test. So, I just thought I would make a quick video of me actually doing this bit, because this is turning out to be, of course, not straightforward. I've done these first 2 here and just put in an excess line and scrape the top off using actually a chisel, seemed to be the flattest edge, and then by running the chisel up here I could scrape the excess off, and that's what I've put there. So then you get a nice flat line. A little bit of white either side, but I've got the epoxy to sand off. But now straight away I can see that's beginning to like contract, or maybe soak into the gap of the wood or something, I don't know. Anyway, I thought I would just do a quick, like me doing it just for the hell of it, because you can judge the amount you put in there. So I thought for this one, what I might do is actually just leave it for a couple of minutes before I chisel it, and see if it shrinks. And by obviously slowing down the speed here, you can gauge how much of the sealant you put into the gap, but I'm obviously just looking for it to protrude slightly above the surface. But whatever, when I bring the chisel down, if there's a low point, it fills in the gap. So that's no good, is it? I can't have a slightly U-shaped shallow bit, or can I? It will actually reinforce the lines for sure, because the varnish will take on that slight U shape, but I'm trying to get a flat finish, certainly not a protruding finish to that. So not straightforward again. So no luck with that one. That's doing the same. So what I've done is just put a little bit more extra sealant on there, and I thought I would just run it again and then see if I can make that one flat. I mean, that's better. It doesn't look perfect. And as I said, you just run the chisel along here and you can scrape off the excess. It leaves a little bit of a line, which kind of means that the wood is kind of flared up, isn't it? Because the chisel is flat and it's not getting into that line just there. Perhaps if I push a little bit harder, it will. God, this is not easy to get the right finish. That hasn't worked. That has still got, I can see a slight depression to each of those white lines. So maybe the thing to do is to let it dry and then put a second line in over the top. I'll crack on with this and then I'll do that. Okay, well there it is. I've done them all and I just added this bit because I can just see in the light, or you might actually catch on the camera how that is sinking in. Despite having done those two twice, they're no better than any of the others. Yeah, it's a really good idea, I think, to practice this, isn't it? There's a couple of things that come out of this. One is that you've got to epoxy that wood first, because otherwise this would just stain the wood and you'd never get it out, make a complete mess of the deck. So by doing this, at least you can sand it back down to the epoxy, possibly the plywood, and then you can seal it in. This means really I've got to find this wood. I've got to solve this problem now. I've got to get 3mm by 6mm cross section of white wood of some sort, beech or something like that, I would imagine. And then I shall lay up the other bits of plywood this afternoon and then find a way to cut that and stick them in and see if that comes out better than this. I'll let this dry now and then I'll sand it back and just see what it looks like, and perhaps on one or two just go for a second coat down the white stripe and see if I can get it absolutely flat. It's very difficult to see how deep that depression is. Maybe a bit of sanding will flatten it off. Who knows? I don't know. That's the whole point of this, and then to leave it all out in the sun and see how it weathers, which I think, I don't know, I've not seen this feedback on the forum anywhere of people's experiences. There's a lot of stuff that, isn't it, that you do when you go through build a boat, and that's the whole point, is to feed this back to people who are doing this, that hopefully that will make life a bit easier for them. There we go. Well, I've just surprised myself. I thought I'd got a piece of scrap wood out of my little wood store down there. It's just ordinary Douglas fir, so it's not white wood, but I thought I would set my blade here to 6mm and see if I could cut it. Took a little bit of, as you can see, I've cut quite a few. I got 7mm and then 5mm, and then I got a very thin one, which was an offcut, which is 3mm, would you believe? So I ran that through the 3mm into the 6mm store, and look what I ended up with. I ended up with a strip of wood that is 3mm deep, and I think it's probably about 5mm wide. There's a little bit of a gap there, but if I can cut, let me get that in there. That's not bad. Because if I can cut 5mm, and obviously 6mm is possible. That's a little bit yellow, isn't it, for the wood? I really want to get a white wood, but I shall go off to Leroy Merlin tomorrow, and I shall get myself some white beech wood and get it as near as I can down to a thin piece of wood, but I can cut it, and actually if I get a bigger piece of wood, I've just got plenty of wood to play with. So I can probably do this, I'm thinking now, and on the face of it, this is looking actually a better finish. The question is can I manufacture this, cut it in sufficiently long lengths for a decking board without joins? I think I probably can, you know, if you had a 2 meter length of wood. Blimey, there's no reason why I can't push that through this saw. I put a new blade on, I've got a finer blade, so hell, you never know what you can do till you try, do you? So I'm champion with that one. My squidge deck is up there with the white stuff I've just done, is up in the sun drying. It's taken quite a long time, but we'll come back with results of that. And hopefully tomorrow I'll go to Leroy, get some wood, and I can get on and do this one. I've glued this one up and it's ready to go. Good news. Well, another quick update to what is going on. My piece of wood that I've done, and I've put this marine sealant here on it, and this is now 3 days later and it's still sort of tacky. It's kind of touch dry, but really not still dry enough to sand. And it does say that it takes 3 days, is it 5 to 7 days to cure fully? Didn't realise that. But as it's curing, I don't know if you can see this, but it's starting to bubble up, particularly down the edges. You're getting a funny line, and it's happening on all of them. In fact, somewhere there's a pothole. This has got wrinkled bits in there, and there's bubbles just there. It's really not looking very good. There it is. There's a pothole has appeared there. So it's messy. It's taken too long to dry, and the finish is not good. Its only saving grace is that it is brilliant white, which it could be better. And I'm going to leave it another couple of days, and then I'm going to try and sand it flat. And I don't think I'm going to try and fill this in again, because, well, it'll take another week to let it go off. But it does seem to have leveled off somewhat, although it's still a little bit raised. I don't know if I can put a straight edge on there and just see. Yeah, no, it's still dipped, isn't it? Yep. It's never mind. I did go into town and I bought myself some strips of wood, 3 millimeters deep, but 8 or 9 millimeters wide, I think, and I've got a 6 millimeter gap there. So it's not quite the white wood that I wanted. I got quite a few strips just in case, to make life easier. So I might just try routing this out, or creating another one, a separate board on this, and then just using some 6mm strips on that. We've been talking about what's the ideal and looking some of the pictures on the Glenelg forum, and different people are saying different things. Some are saying this is too wide, some say this isn't wide enough, but this seems to be the main comment. These are 60mm wide, and I'm thinking of making them 70 or 80mm wide, slightly, I mean, less of these stripes. It does look a bit busy, doesn't it? And I think this is a bit of an optical illusion at the moment because it's spilling out on the sides. It will come down to straight lines when sanded, but I'll put it out there. Does anybody have any opinions? I don't know if it's written anywhere. I haven't seen it as to what the width of those planks should be and what the width of the white should be. So I'll ask the question. I might do this is 60, I'll do one of 80, and then I'll put that on one later, and then I think I'll wrap this one up and get it out, and then I'll get these varnished and put them out in the sun. So spent a couple of hours sanding and messing around with these strips of wood this morning, and to some more surprising results. First of all, the strips of wood that I bought here were 9 millimeters, and I managed to just trim them down. This gap was actually 7 millimeters in the end, so I was able to run them through the saw and then make them really tight, and so I had to glue them in, bang them in, actually tap them in with a rubber mallet. There it went a bit wrong in the machine, but these two here are actually solid. And what I've done is sanded it down. I've wiped that off just to give it the effect of what it will look like, and it's quite impressive. I like that you get absolutely straight lines there, no imperfections. You get a grain in that wood. Obviously this is way too yellow, these strips. I need to get some beech and to do that, but as a sort of a test of how it looks and how easy is it to do it, because it's relatively easy to sand, and you can't see it because it's wet, but I've sanded through most of the epoxy here to the back to the mahogany, which is a really good clue that things are getting down to the bottom and to stop the sanding. And this is the Marine 3M 5200, which is kind of cured, and I was able to sand it. I've wiped it again with a rag just to sort of, so you can see what it will look like under a varnished deck, and it's quite impressive. That's the good thing. I like the colour, it's whiter than that, and that's what I should be aiming for, something that's definitely too yellow. But this, I don't know if you can see in the reflection of the light, it is stippled, it's got little bubbles, there's that hole. I've got to take more care than that, obviously, but sanding this back to the wood, you're still left with a nice flat surface but an uneven texture on the filler. So that's where we're left from. So I'm going to put it out there with the end of this, because I can't really do, I haven't got any white wood to do the last bit that I want to do, but I want to get these epoxied and I can get them outside. So the issues are basically the width of the wood. This is 60 millimeters, so is that too thin? I'm proposing to go up to 70 mil for the next one, and then this is 9 millimeters here, and this is 7 millimeters. So this has worked out a little bit thicker. You can also see that if there's any imperfections in the wood along the cut, the filler shows them up, which is not so good. And I've sanded that back now to the wood, so I can't really sand it anymore, which is not a good thing. So my inclination is that this is not such a great idea. It's certainly easy to put in, but it's a sod to sand. The wood has more texture, it produces straighter lines, but it's not as white as that. So should I make the effort and try to do that a bit better? I don't know. I'll varnish these up, just show them varnished, and get them outside in the sun, and then I'll wrap this up, and then some opinions would be really good. How wide do you think that mahogany should be? I'm proposing 10 mil more, could be 20 to reduce the number of white lines slightly, or thinner, and the thickness of the white lines. What do you think of that? Is that about right? Let me know. Cheers, man.